Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to this week's episode of the Flower Lounge, and I am so excited to have a guest who is joining us from the incredibly beautiful island of Singapore. Thank you for joining us, Tiffany Soi Tong Suk. She is a proponent. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. That was amazing.
she's a proponent of limitless living and unintentional. Although I'm going to ask you about that because I think there's some intentional boundary breaking going on here too. Tiffany is an astrophysicist by qualification and a STEM careerist who now works as a wellness and personal growth advisor. She's a former Olympic hopeful gymnast and an advanced competitive and outdoor rock climber, a qualified yoga teacher, a creator of ClimbFlow Movement, the dynamic yoga and fitness method created for rock climbers and anyone who wants to elevate in body and mind. She's also classically trained soprano and performance artist, as well as being an insatiable explorer and travel fiend. She uses the term astrophysicist, someone who believes in the power of our cosmic, beyond physical magic being manifested through our experiences as brilliant physical beings. She encourages everyone to explore and embrace their entirety to cultivate their own version of a brilliant, fulfilling life. So later, when you're super stoked on hearing and seeing more of Tiffany, you can find her at Tiffany Soi, and that's SOI. And that's what I'm used to calling you, Tiffany Soi. But I love actually saying your whole last name. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. No, I love my last name. It's just generally speaking within, presenting or trying to make people comfortable. It's a mouthful and people get really stuck and they've always been getting really stuck with it. So it was helpful to kind of just make it neat and tidy. But no, I love my full name. I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that.
Yes.
But let's do the childhood exercise. So closing your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to a time in your childhood when you played around flowers or plants, see if you can identify a favorite. Think about what you were doing at the time and who you were with. And then reflect on 3 words you would use to describe the personality of your favorite flower or botanical. And when you're ready, open your eyes and let us know what you're thinking about.
So I am playing with my little brother. We are probably about 3 or 4 years old, and we are outside under our huge magnolia tree that we were very blessed to have, luckily, in our house, in our garden. And it's huge and white and glorious, and it's so happy, it's sunny, and everything about that moment and those flowers just tells me, purity, joy, wisdom, quiet, majestic quality to all of that. So, yeah.
Well, what we find is that the words you use to describe your childhood favorite would describe how you bring your greatest gifts into this world with purity, majestic, joyful. Does it resonate?
It's such a funny thing, to kind of apply those words like to yourself, right? But I hope I'm bringing some of that into the world. There's such a vibrant feeling when I connect with that image. It's so warm.
Yeah, so probably the listeners could tell that you don't have a Singaporean accent. But you're living in Singapore. So maybe just tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you got to Singapore.
So I'm born and bred in London, UK. I come from a mixed race background. So my mum is Polish, my dad is Thai Chinese, and by way of meandering through life over the last few decades, I'm currently in Singapore. So I'm essentially splitting my time between London and Singapore, kind of majoritively Singapore at the moment. So
What's it like to live in Singapore?
It's extremely hot all the time.
I remember when we met for coffee. It was such a beautiful day because we were in that beautiful coffee shop having coffee and like a little cake or something. And it was just like pouring rain, pouring rain out. It was so beautiful.
It's incredible. I mean, the rainstorms here are, when they happen, they are a force of their own, and it's magnificent. I've never sort of experienced sort of thunderstorms on the regularity that we do have here. And downside is that it's really humid most of the time, and my hair is mostly a disaster. So, but hardly a thing to kind of complain about in the bigger picture. So
everybody's sweating a lot.
But it's super green, as far as like cities go. I mean, it's so green, it's really luscious. There are just, there's flowers everywhere, there are plants everywhere. Just nature is literally like on your doorstep, and you're surrounded by it. And even now, like I have sunbirds, like miniature sort of hummingbird-esque creatures continuing to build their nest like outside my window. And that is, there aren't many places in the world where you would get that experience. So yeah.
That's so sweet. Well, I know that you have such an interesting background, and I really see you as a boundary breaker. And I know that, you talked about in your bio, unintentional, intentional, and maybe you could just sort of like list off a few ways throughout your life that you've been
either intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah. Or been, like the only one of XYZ, and what that's taught you.
Okay. I mean, in terms of very first fundamentals, I was pretty much the only multi-ethnic kid in school, which was an interesting space to be in. Not because we didn't have multi-ethnic groups. We had tons. We had, Indian children, Sri Lankan children, Chinese children, Filipino children, Irish children, English children, but there weren't many mixed race children. So that was definitely a thing. So that was, quite apparent that we were somehow different. And, that there weren't many families where you had, like essentially, a white European mom and, and an Asian dad, or any other, kind of combo. And that was kind of special. So I loved that there was this, this kind of different, unique thing about like the way our family was constructed.
Right.
So there's definitely that, I think. So kudos to my parents for kind of kicking that off as, being very, I mean, I would say very brave people at the time, because it just wasn't a dumb thing to kind of make a stance and say, yeah, this is the family that we want to create, despite, generally a lot of stigma that's associated with that, and it being sort of out of the norm. So that was, something really to kind of draw a lot of strength from in the stance that my parents took. And that we weren't any worse for, that you're not, just because you're different, that actually makes you something unique, that gives you something, that gives you a sort of a power.
Right.
And that we're all born with like a special combination of powers, like unique to us. So that was that. And then I was one of the only, at least within my realm, kids who was kind of excelling at school, but also excelling as an elite gymnast, and balancing both. So that was, a very formative period of my life doing those things.
You said Olympic hopeful. So you were set up to go into the Olympics as a
that was like the goal. Yeah, that was the absolute goal. That is everything that I was training for.
What happened?
So what happened was, two things happened. One, they changed the legal competition age from being before you could compete sort of any age, and then they put a clause in that you had to be a minimum of age 16 to compete. And so that suddenly changed my timeline from sort of, okay, this is now say like 2 years away of what I'm gunning for,
right?
As in I've been training for 10 years, now I only have 2 years left. It now added another 4 years to that timeline, which was huge, which was really, really huge, especially when you're kind of peaking around that sort of 15, 16 time period. It's very different now. The way gymnastics has progressed, which is what's very different now. There's a lot more longevity in it. And then also I had accumulated such compounded injuries on my feet that I needed to have surgery, because the bones were that messed up in my feet.
Wow.
And I was in a huge amount of pain.
Super rigorous training at such a young age.
Yes, it's 6 days a week, 4 hours a day, plus school, and that would have loaded up close to 7. And, the expectation would have been that, I'd majoritively drop school and start taking up training sessions twice a day for 4 hours, 2 sessions, 6 days a week.
Oh my God, it's overwhelming.
So, yeah. So, it was that thing of like, there is this dream, and not just like a dream of like, fantasy and, wishy-washy. It's like, this is legitimately like something that can happen in my life. And then there was the part which was, I have to make a judgment call,
right,
which was that I'm going to have to hack up my feet, put them back together again.
Mm-hmm.
What's that going to do, and how is that going to impact my future? And I made a judgment call that I said, I'm walking away from this.
Right.
And that was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. But I absolutely believe that it was the right decision. And it's something that I took with me, through the rest of my life.
How did that rigorous training affect you? Like, how does it affect you now? Like in terms of you're rock climbing and you're doing yoga. Do you find that you still hold yourself to really super high standards, even though you're older now? Or have you, because I've heard you talk before about something that I find highly fascinating, which is I've heard you say like having like a non-aggressive stance toward yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely I have, held this concept of high standards and, high integrity through pretty much everything that I've done. But what I've learned in terms of getting older is that there is this magical space, which is so hard to tap into, where we can be strong and intense and focused without aggression and self-punishment and all this additional added kind of stress and anxiety associated with that. And actually, if we can find this place where we feel the drive, because we feel the passion, we feel the curiosity, and we believe in what we're aiming towards, that we can have that without these external, not external, but these additional elements that kind of cloud and take up so much more energy as part of that. So go on.
Let me ask you about self-punishment. When do you find either yourself or your clients or friends engaging in self-punishment, and how today even? Because I see it in myself.
I think we all see it in ourselves.
I'm curious about other people.
We live in a world of shoulds. There are a lot of shoulds that are constructed in our environment, and people that I spend time with is, I should be this, I should be that, because I am not this or not that, I am a failure because I didn't achieve X, Y, Z, I am a failure. And it kind of, spirals off into a lot of negative dialogue about how, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not talented, I'm not capable, I don't have the right qualifications, I don't have this, I don't have, it's a lot of I am not, and also, how I failed.
And how did you free yourself of that kind of, or, it could also help, I suppose, but when you were studying to be in a career that there were hardly any women in, or when you are climbing a mountain or rock climbing, like how, or just living in a different country, like you're not, you're living outside of the norm, right?
It's cultivating this idea of self-awareness is a long-term process. And the thing is, it's not that you ever necessarily cure, these sort of dark voices coming up. They will always pop up, but it's how we identify and go, oh, here is this voice that's coming up. How much of that is me? How much of that is, the fear voice, the fear language acting up because, I'm being pushed right now. I'm being challenged right now. I feel like I'm coming to the edge of something. So my safety mechanism is saying retreat, 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 because we want to be in this safe bubble, but it's an overdrive. So cultivating that kind of self-awareness does take time. It does take time to sort of sit and be interested with yourself and observing yourself on a daily basis as a routine. And I know that sounds really boring and like unmagical.
Routine.
But no, I really do believe in routine and regular practices on the daily, like, these rituals that we can cultivate for ourselves, which help us come back to this inner space and go, oh, what's going on? And I went through a lengthy process of being, one, equipped with, with these sort of very, very basic sort of skills, but which do so much in terms of me going, right, this is what I'm thinking and this is what I'm feeling. And now I have this list of shoulds. Whose opinion is that? Is that my opinion or is that someone else's opinion? And now the thing is, sometimes we will have, and sort of an expectation or a concept or a goal that we're like, that is mine. And that is something that I want to hold myself up to. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these other things are coming from other people and what they have created. And we need to stop and ask the question, well, why is it like that? And who decided that this was a rule or that this was a format or that this was a construct? And why can I not be in that and engaging with that if I am genuinely interested and curious about that space? So yeah, it's a process of trying to tap into that self-awareness and self-dialogue and conversation, listening to that and using that as a tool to help you kind of pick apart some of the boxes that we have like created in our environment.
What are some of the other boxes that you've broken through? Like, you had a really great story about a teacher who told you couldn't do something, and that was a great story.
Yes. That? So I was labeled as a mathematical dunce, which essentially I guess I am in terms of mental arithmetic. And, like sort of quick maths, which is generally what is used to kind of assess mathematical ability, especially in school. It's like, mm-hmm. do the sum. And if you can do that, then, you're smart. And if you can't do that, then, you are not smart, right, in mathematical terms. So I'd had this, outside of sports, I had this vision and hope that, one day I'll go and do a physics degree. My mum actually did physics as well when she was at university. She's kind of super bright spark. And I had this vision and dream that I want to do that. I was told that I was mathematically inept. And the real fundamental actually to study physics is that you do mathematics pre-university plus what we label further mathematics plus chemistry, as well as physics. So actually the fundamentals are in maths, and I had such a hard time with it. I the way that it was being taught to me, I really struggled with the understanding and the assimilating of this like knowledge, and I was like, I don't know why I don't get this.
Sure.
And this wasn't my maths teacher, but there was another maths teacher in my school who wasn't directly teaching me, and he said to me, like, Tiffany, I promise you will get this. It is time, it is process, and it's a teacher finding a way that will teach you. And he did his best to kind of instill some basic fundamentals within me. But I was very like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I was so drawn to this message that I cannot, and that I am not capable. Anyway, fast forward a couple of years, 3 years down the line, I graduated with a first-class astrophysics degree, and my thesis was in cosmology and applied mathematical theory. So what a kind of turnaround from the assumptions and labels that had been put on me by the majority of, literally 90%, 95% of all other mathematics teachers who said I was not able to do this. And it all came down to a teacher at university, bearing in mind that I actually didn't get into university having applied for physics. I actually applied for a media arts degree, and literally on the first day transferred to physics, to which the department was like, you realize people don't do this, and you have no maths background and all this sort of stuff.
You're not qualified.
You are not qualified. You're not qualified. But the professor in cosmology in that department, I don't know, he saw something in me. He said he saw a passion. He saw some kind of spark which said that I was worth taking a chance on, and that he believed he could educate me and teach me in a way of learning mathematical theory that other teachers have not been able to, and that I would get it, but I would just have to work extremely hard, like twice as hard, to go through the process of acquiring those skills. And, you know, sure enough, I remember this moment where this is probably about like my second year, and we're doing space science and, you know, universes and cosmologies and things like that. And there are these huge mathematical formulas that you do, which probably take, you know, 30 to 40 minutes to kind of like, you know, work through and equate and da, 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 da. And I remember completing one of those and I went, oh my God, like, I'm understanding this, and I'm understanding this language that has been so foreign to me. It makes sense. Right. And I went on to do that as a thesis and so on. So that was such a profound period of my life. And it wasn't, I think people get confused here, the idea that, you know, being successful at something, it's because it kind of like fell into your lap and you got lucky, and, you know, you were, you know, there is a lot of that in life, being in the right place in the right time, meeting the right people, blah, 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 all these sorts of things. But it's also part of your willingness to engage with a process and a work ethic, and that it's required everywhere, in every facet of my life. You choose to engage in a work process and an ethic because you are interested in that process. Obviously there's kind of an end goal floating around somewhere, but those things are only ever achieved, modified, surpassed when actually you get stuck in the process in the every single day, and you are fascinated with that process in the everyday. And I think that's what gets people to, you know, where they say want to be / beyond where they want to be or expect by having that interest, developing these obsessions about, you know, so far in the future and not remembering what's actually occurring right now. So that I think was, you know, a huge thing of being like, you know, you're being told you cannot, you don't fit in this box, you don't have the right this, you don't have the right that, but, you know, and you feel terrified, but you take a chance anyway. And the failure part is you accept that there will be a possibility of failure, because anything that we put ourselves into, there is always that element. But saying, well, you know what, I am more interested in taking a chance and getting stuck in the process and seeing what happens, rather than being wholly put off by the concept and the notion of fear and being told that I'm not good enough. And I've seen that time and time again.
Speaking of failure, you use the word failure. What would be an example of a quote unquote failure in your life that you most cherish?
I mean, it's such a bad word, isn't it? Because we know when we talk about failure, I mean, really at the end of the day, like what actually happened?
What really is failure?
Yeah. You know, I think we see failures as, you know, I didn't meet the expectation that I had set out for myself. I didn't get the grade on this test. I didn't get the grades on these set of, you know, exams. I remember the first time I didn't get an A and I cried. I mean, I burst into tears. And it was like, you know, I don't understand. I'm like, you know, when I work hard. And then you come to realize that not getting A's, or that not being, you know, perfect at something is part of a process, because it means there's more for you to grow into and there's more for you to develop into. And just because it doesn't happen within the first 5 minutes, within the first month, within the first year, it doesn't mean that is not going to, you know, kind of transform and materialize somewhere else down the line. It's just within these constructs that we have set out, you know, in the same way that, no, I wasn't able to learn about maths pre-university in the way that everyone else did. But 3 years later, I actually had, you know, I had better results and better grades than kids who had come into with those super high prerequisites. I was just, you know, a slower, I don't know, what did you call it? A slow bloomer. That's a late bloomer in that intellectual space. So yeah, failure. I mean, there are so many of these things when, like I said, in hindsight, they are such small disappointments in those senses. Not winning a competition, that you're really wanting to, because somewhere in the back of your mind, you have that goal and you have that hope. But it teaches you something. It's like you go, really, and every single given day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this month, as long as you feel like you have done the best or moved towards the best that you could have done in that day, within that time, with the skills and the remits that you had within you in that moment and conditions, that's really the best that we can kind of hope for. And that isn't necessarily going to equate to you smashing absolutely every single goal that you had set out for every single day and month and year of your life. Setbacks, I think, are so educational and informative in highlighting the kind of dialogue that we do have with ourselves. It comes back to that thing, the self-punishment. And what are we getting out of that? Because is that encouraging us to move forward and continue taking a step? Or is that signaling to us to, cut all things off and stop engaging and stop moving forwards? That's not to say sometimes we have to take stock of certain situations. You go, you know what? Maybe I need to pivot, and maybe I need to go down this side road instead of this path that I am on, because I can see that actually, continuing in this way is perhaps not the most productive way for me and is not the most helpful way. So I need to assess this. So that is what, failure, I think, teaches us, not getting a job, not landing that interview. Again, nobody died in the process, hopefully. Like, the world didn't end, but we dramatize and we make things so huge, especially, I think, if you are a very feeling oriented person, or you're quite, an emotional person. And I say sensitive, not in the sense of, like, that's it, being really sensitive, but, quite emotionally in tune with that dynamic. You feel things so very, very keenly, and you take things very, very personally. And it's very easy to kind of see those things as a slight against you as a person, when actually, a lot of the time it's stuff that doesn't have anything to do with you. So many things in this life occur that have nothing to do with you and your quality and your character. And it's part and parcel of the process. You will never win every single time. You will not get absolutely everything that you want. But that's kind of not the point, The point is, I think, how you're choosing to live an experience every single day, and what you are bringing to the table, and the kind of person that you want to present yourself as, and how much negativity we want to absorb from, the world and other people, and how much we want to try and put some more positive energy back into that. And that is not an easy thing by any means.
And what have you learned from living in Asia?
Oh gosh, so much. I mean, Asia itself is very multifaceted in that sense. So there are definitely little dynamics that are different to each country. I'm living here in Singapore, which is sort of one thing, but I also spend a lot of time in Thailand, which is where my dad is from. Yeah. That, I think, is hugely influential in terms of how I navigate the world. And actually, it only took when I started spending more time in Thailand that I think started challenging some of my more Western hardline expectations and attitudes, despite obviously having a really positive influence, like from my dad, who is a Buddhist. Anyone who has been to Thailand or to somewhere like Bangkok, for example, will know that it is a crazy busy place. I mean, it is.
Bangkok so much. I love it.
It is wild. It is crowded. It is noisy. It is
beautiful. Oh,
but it's so rich and full of life. And I think coming from outside that environment into it, it's very easy to just see it as noise. But when you are in that environment and you kind of pay attention to the way that everything works, that's the thing. It flows. There is a flow to the insanity of the traffic. There is a flow because everybody anticipates the next ridiculous move, and they're aware and they allow for it. And there is give and there is take, and there isn't this same level of fury that I think is a little bit more prevalent in Western society, is sort of a really dark seriousness and stress level that permeates through so much of it, especially like say our city life, right? Bangkok is somewhere where there is a flow and an allowance. And I think that is what has taught me so much. And I think that's what a lot of people feel that they take away from there is, how do we allow for all of these things to happen around us without getting knocked off our feet, without being so completely overwhelmed and thrown by that. I mean, you yourself, you've used beautiful descriptions about, like riding waves, right? You ride on a wave and you can ride it, and then you can choose to, like hop on to the next one and keep riding that undulation, or you can get lost and crash into, the tumble of that wave and get completely swallowed up by it. And I think in sort of our Western environment, we have a lot of this, ride this peak so much to the point to sort of a peak that you can't really maintain or manage, and you do crash and burn. And then it's like trying to pick back up from there. Whereas there's something a bit more balanced in the kind of the energy in Thailand, around Asia, where, ride a wave, understand where your limits are, know when to move, know when to transfer, know when you need to say no to certain things, when are making allowances for that, and know when you can kind of give and lean into other things as well. So there's a different kind of peacefulness amongst that noise that I find is fascinating, and every time I am there, I feel it, and there's like an awareness and kind of like a wonderment in every tiny detail. It's not, as in every country, you have the wealthy, you have the poor, probably Thailand is an example where you do have like the extremely poor. And, it's very much life on the streets in so many ways, from eating to living.
But even just like thinking about food, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
I spent time in Asia. Last time I was there was about a year ago. And I was so shocked at just like how I had forgotten how easy it was to get food in Asia. And I mean, this seems like something really simple, but I don't know, like when was the last time you were in the States, but it's like in the US, we talk about self-punishment. We like don't eat at the right time. We skip meals. We work. Then when we're like the blood sugar is like finally super crashed out, then we're like, gotta go eat. Where do I eat? What can I eat? Crap, I can't have gluten. I can't have dairy. I can't have and then like there's this tiny list of places that you can go, or you're cooking your own food, but it takes too long. Like it's this crazy, like food is like
food
such a thing, right? And then you go to Asia and it's like literally like in Taiwan, in Thailand, in Singapore, like you can get healthy, cheap, fresh cooked food just like down the block. And it's so easy. And you can eat like 5-6 times a day and everybody's skinny and fit. And like, it's just like, it's unbelievable to me how, like something that you think is not really a big deal, but it's pretty fundamental for our survival, right?
Oh, so fundamental. And I think we have in the US, in the UK, in Europe, there's a lot of food stress, like a huge amount of food stress. Which, there's so much guilt around what we're eating and everything that's wrong. And, like you say, every intolerance, which that's not to say, those are things we need to pay attention to. And I am absolutely a purveyor and a believer in taking time to understand what food works with your body.
Exactly.
Before you jump on a bandwagon of like a trend or a food fad. I think it's super important. But like you say, in Asia, the food stress is just not there. Literally everything orients around food and food practices and food, sort of like say rituals. Let's take Japan, for example. Again, very, very delicate, refined rituals. And you have that in every nation, in Thailand as well, in China. But it's about food, and it's a celebration, and it's an enjoyment. And your day is like completely structured around like food times. It's about eating. Like, I mean, it's interesting, like my family in Thailand, I mean, they all have kitchens, that they don't use their kitchens except to store stuff, because
Exactly. You never have to cook.
You just go out and eat. And it's amazing, right? Like, you know, when you're trying to get like amazing, say like Thai food in a Western restaurant, and you're paying like an arm and a leg, and then like, you know, here it's just like a couple of dollars and you can get the most incredibly fragrant, vibrant, like you say, fresh, tasty things. And it's like, it's a very easy thing to fall into. But, you know, money or no money or whatever, like everybody comes out into the streets and eats, right. You know, and that's so much of that like culture and practice. It is for everyone, and it's for everyone to enjoy without guilt. And I love that. And it's true, when you kind of have access to good and fresh food, and you have a different, like I said, free, guilt-free, open, enjoyable, you know, sort of grateful mindset that just, you know, I say, you know, almost I can just indulge in the pleasure of eating. Your body responds in a completely different way as well when it doesn't have that restriction. It doesn't go into that like starvation, must hold on to everything, you know, type thing. It just allows it. It's part of this process of like nourishing yourself, and it will, you know, it'll be part of you, and it will be passed through you, and it's there to give you life, and it's there to give you energy, and your whole attitude, your whole thing, just your vibe changes, and that's wonderful.
You know what? It's the opposite of self-punishment. It's like,
absolutely.
And it's like every single day, like 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, like the joy, you know, the joy.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so funny.
This is like a whole world. This is like this whole other world that we need to like dive into. It's like the joy of eating, like bringing back the joy of eating. Like okay, you know, who doesn't love a good brunch here and there and so on, but like more on that daily level, you know, like, do you love your breakfast? Like, do you love your lunch? Like, do you love the dinner that you're having? And then if it's going to be like a chocolate bar or whatever, like, do you love that chocolate bar? Because I know I do. And I'll be the first one to say that, you know, if I'm going to have chocolate or anything else, I'm going to love it and enjoy it guilt-free. I'm not going to give myself hang-ups about it, because it's going to do more stress and more negativity.
And I wonder if that has something to do with like the plant life. Because I know when I was in Singapore last time, I was thinking, you know, it was just like looking around at the jungly, like luscious plant life that could, I mean, you know, literally you'd see like a wall, and then you'd see like a tree sprouting out of the middle of this like brick wall. And, you know, places where, you know, if left untended, the jungle just sort of like swallows them. And and to me, it was like so many lessons in the flowers and plants in Asia were about abundance, and about like the fact that we live in a paradise and everything is so abundant. And like the food thing is just one sort of example of abundance, and this like abundance mentality. And, you know, like Singapore could be sort of like New York, you know, but New York is so much more like grinding, hustling. And in Singapore, people work really hard too, right?
Oh, God,
like in the kopitiams, they might be like complaining about whatever, but like people don't seem to be in any way, shape, or form into the like self-punishing thing that we're doing in the West. Or maybe it's not as apparent in terms of like the food and the daily culture.
I think it's an interesting mix. I mean, Singapore's like, you know, it's pretty hardcore and pretty serious. It's got some of like the longest working hours and things. And you know, in terms of the education system, it's pretty serious going. But that could spark up a whole other conversation. But like you say, in terms of like that attitude to abundance, I think, you know, within, let's say, taking it back to more Chinese culture, that concept of abundance, you know, maybe it's a little money oriented, but it's kind of that premise that, you know, abundance is your entitlement, and that you deserve it too, and that it's all around us, and that you have it within you have it within your life. You're born surrounded by it, and you are there to kind of, you know, give and participate in it. Whereas I think, you know, in other parts of, say, the world, it's like say that grind and that hustle, it's like this is something so far away from you, and then it's something that's so unattainable, and you have to, like, you know, destroy yourself in the process in order to acquire it, and you have to work so hard for it to be a facet in your life, and that it only happens to, you know, this kind of person. Whereas here it's just like you say, it's not just abundance and say money. There is about that in your nature, in your environment, in your in your daily practices, in your food, in your health, and enjoying that and absorbing that and saying that, hey, I am worthy and deserving of abundance in all aspects of my life too, and I don't need to have guilt around that.
Right. It doesn't take it away from someone else.
Right. Exactly.
It's like everyone can be abundant and experience abundance.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely something, that shapes the transition in, I think, your approach to every facet of your life when you have that.
Very, very interesting. And have you noticed that after you spent more time in Thailand and more time in Asia, that your approach to rock climbing has changed at all?
I think so. It comes back to this concept of flow and allowance and giving and driving without aggression, moving and being strong without aggression. My dad is someone, for example, he's a huge influence. My parents generally are huge influences, but they're so different. My dad is someone who's so strong and so willed, but so gentle. And there is so much of that here, that you can get what you want without screaming and shouting about it. You can get to the spaces that you want to be in without destroying yourself in the process, by being aware and reflective. And like I said, it comes back to process. Everything is process. It's engaging with the process on the daily, that's what moves you forward. And definitely, like in my rock climbing, the climbing in Thailand is spectacular. And there are very few places in the world that you can have the glory of nature's playground in terms of the rock that it provides you to climb on, the limestone, and quite literally be like on a beach right there and then have like an ocean. It's insane. A lot of people kind of market as, it's overrated, it's old, it's been done, it's, it's over, it's been overused and so on, and there's nothing left there and it's boring. I love it. I love it. And even, earlier this year, I broke some big personal ground in terms of the grades that I was climbing. And this goes back to this thing, thinking that I was past it, thinking that, being over 30, like, you're too old, you're too past it, you're physically not capable, you'll never get strong again, da 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 da. And having engaged actually in a process over the last few months, just shown myself again, it's like, no, there is still so much more to go at. And that a lot of that has come from what we highlighted, coming to engaging with strength in a softer way, in a more forgiving way. And that means looking at my body and trying to understand how it works and how my mind works, to say that I want to be able to climb and move, because movement is this therapy and this medicine and this magic and this something that we are born to do. I want to be able to do it for the rest of my life. So if it means going slightly slower and taking a bit more time, then that is worth it. If it means that I keep myself I keep myself intact and I keep myself stable and I can keep riding the wave, and that there is an acceptance, which I don't think we have so much of when we're a little bit younger. And I see that within myself, because it's meant to be like this perpetual upward trajectory, like in every facet of your life, rather than understanding that sometimes it will go up and then it will plateau. Sometimes it will dip a little bit and then it will go back up, and trying to find a comfort in that undulation and that variation in these facets in our life, without feeling that your life is falling apart, or feeling that because this has dipped a little bit that now you're suddenly a failure. And yeah.
It's like learning a language. I remember being 16 and being in Germany and moving to Germany for a year by myself as an exchange student and not knowing any German, and then learning, later learning Spanish. And you go through that. If you've learned a language, a foreign language, that you have those moments, right, of when you feel like, wow, like I am useless. I don't understand a word anyone is saying today. Why? And then the next day you feel like, oh my God, I totally got this. I understand everything. I'm even getting the jokes. Wow. And then you'll have another period where you're just like, why can I not get the simplest thing? And I think that it's almost like on Kelly Bergen's podcast episode, she was talking about,
amazing.
it's so good, right? She was talking about how children need to have fevers when they're young in order to develop their brain. And in some cases, there's theory about personal and spiritual development coming out of these types of fevers. And it makes me wonder, like, so when we go 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, you know, when we have those days when we're learning languages where we're just like, oh my God, I'm a loser. Or it could be an emotional pattern, right? We have some pattern and we're like, oh, I'm so over that. Wow, I'm so free from that. I'm so done with that. And then suddenly it rears its ugly head and you're just like, we want to crawl in a little hole of emotional, you know, trauma about it. And I had this thing happen this year with, of all things, salsa dancing. Where I realized, so I was dancing, and then I joined the team because I wanted to learn faster and better and accelerate and be better at spins. And right. So then I started dancing, like, I don't know, 20, 25 hours a week. It was kind of crazy. And then being on the team, it was like push, 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 push. And then finally I had to quit the team because I was like pushing myself so much during the day in business that to push at night was too much. But here's the one thing I learned that I was like really surprised by. And maybe you have had the same experience with climbing. I'm curious. If I took off like a month in July to go do a Flowerlounge tour around the United States, I would come back to salsa dancing and I would be better after having taken a month off than when I left. And when I quit the team, and now I'm only dancing like, I don't know, 5 to 10 hours a week. Only 2 nights a week. I feel like I'm progressing at a much faster rate by doing less. And so there's this whole like, how much can we play with, whether it's in business and work, in movement, that less is actually more. Have you had experiences like that?
Definitely. I growing up and being that sort of perpetual achiever, you know, type. Yeah, it was about, how much can I do? And I'm still guilty of that. I don't claim to be, like I've got this all locked down. I know when I go through periods where I am pushing myself way too hard, but I'm now super aware of it. I'm super aware of it, and I know how to kind of like step back from it, because you need to allow that rest space for your brain to kind of assimilate and pull all those pieces together in the background. And you need to give your brain that downtime and that distraction to kind of just release and play. So playing and dreaming and just kind of wandering free. So, for you, I think on the one hand, like with dancing on the one hand was sort of like a release and play from, the work day, right? And actually by doing your dancing and play, actually it's really contributing to that assimilation of stuff in the background to your business.
Right.
But then when your dancing also suddenly becomes extra work, you're no longer playing so much, and now you're running out of like spaces with which to let yourself kind of be free. And that's not to say that you can't excel at both. Obviously you excel at both, but by giving yourself like that time away, from such intensive dancing, I mean, dancing is it's a whole other kind of like, process, linguistic learning language, but just manifested through your body. It's very easy to get kind of lost in the analytics of that movement and away from the feeling of that movement. And when you get stuck in the analytics of that movement, that's when things start to get really kind of like fuzzy and difficult. But by kind of removing that intensity of that element, you allow it to kind of manifest and connect in your body for those sort of nerve connections to kind of form and those patterns to embed themselves like in the background, so that your body then goes, oh, like I have that skill, I can do that. And actually by when you, it's like, do you drive?
I do.
Yeah. Right. That's probably a silly question. Like, most people in the US drive. Like I remember learning to drive, and the first few times that I tried to drive, I was like, I am never going to be able to do this. And it's like, I meant to be clever, but I cannot do this, because I was so stuck in my head in the analytics of driving. I then I quit doing that for like, I don't know, 3-4 months. And then I came back to it, and I found that actually it was this interesting tolerance. In 1 hour, I wasn't learning quite enough. In 2 hours, I was way too tired per session. If I did 90 minutes, like twice a week, suddenly I was learning at a pace that my body and brain were like processing, and the skills are like embedding themselves. So, you know, everyone kind of has a different tolerance and thing like to play with. And I think that's, you know, that's what we need. For me, equally, climbing has been very much a therapy on a mental, physical level that has brought so much clarity in, like, say, my professional life, this sort of thing where I engage in another process, a different kind of problem solving that's very much through the physicality of my body. And actually in the background, my brain kind of gets this free space to just like, okay, I'm just going to work on this problem and this issue in the background. And so that usually by the end of the climbing session, it's like, oh, I have come to a solution, or, you know, whatever kind of stress and anxiety, it's kind of just like melted away. So it's provided that. In terms of pushing further with climbing, when you take breaks from climbing, you know, you will obviously drop the kind of strength. That's kind of the most obvious, like strength and stamina, you know, disappear, the intensity of those levels. But there is like a skill set. There's like sorry, go on.
But if you were going to climb every day, versus 2 times a day, for example,
every day versus 2 times a week.
Yeah. Would your strength go down?
Well, it's really interesting. And again, I think this is very different for different people. I obviously have a lot of my friends who are, you know, on sort of, you know, pro athletes, and, you know, they climb pretty much every day, and they'll do 4 days on, 1 day off for rest, you know, another 4 days on, that sort of thing. And I mean, they are incredible. And the things that they are achieving, you know, on that pro sport level is phenomenal. And then there are people like me who, you know, have always been perpetually balancing, you know, career and, you know, a sport. And I was climbing a lot less by comparison, climbing a lot less. So maybe twice a week if I was lucky at certain points, but still maintain.
But still, you have a 6-pack.
But still I have a 6-pack. Right. No, but so maintaining that foundational level of like strength, and actually feeling like I was getting a lot more, but also because I was supplementing it with, you know, non-climbing related things, doing my yoga, doing my ClimbFlow kind of mashup of yoga and fitness, because it's like I don't have enough time and space to get to the wall, but doing these things in the background, you know, help me to do this better and physically maintain me better, because, you know, climbing is intensive. It's hard, you know, it's hard on your fingers, it's hard on your wrists, your elbows, your back, your everything. And I had seen that actually when I had gone through really, really intense periods of, you know, climbing, you know, 3-4 times a week, I was super strong, but I was also in a lot of pain. And that obviously if I want to, you know, if I really, really want to push my boundaries again in climbing, and I will have to pick up that level of intensity, you know, for periods of time. But that actually, like right now, I'm getting so much out of, you know, climbing a couple of times a week, doing these other things, and still feeling really healthy, really strong, and then being able to now like kind of go towards my projects and say, you know what, I feel good about doing that. I'll understand if initially I'm not like at a super peak level, but that's okay, because once, you know, I kind of get to kind of project space, that will go back up again. And then when I move away from project space, it will naturally go back down. And so that's that thing around the longevity. There are so many things that continue to embed, and there's so much more awareness that I have about my body and my brain from that, you know, from that practice, and being so intuitive about it now, that I see so much more about what's happening in my system than when I did even from like a few years ago, where I pushed to the point. I was doing competitions, and, you know, this taught me something. You know, I was kind of coming to a peak point of competitions where for me it was like, all right, this is my time. I want to get onto the national team, all these sorts of things. And I was at another event, and I said, I am going to do this competition, and I'm gonna, you know, finish this problem, and I don't even care if I get hurt in the process. Ooh. I actually had said that to myself in my mind. Right. And what happened? I dislocated my shoulder. Ooh. I dislocated my shoulder. And then from there, I ended up, you know, a couple of months, I dislocated my thumb. I hyperextended my elbow. I ran into this whole stream of like really, really horrific injuries. And it was like, I need to take a step back and understand what kind of conversation I'm having with myself. And is it a kind one? And is it a helpful one? And is it going to get me to where I want to go? Or do I need to reevaluate that?
And for the listener who's not climbing mountains, I mean, it's like we might be doing this in other ways, right? We might be
Yeah.
harming ourselves in other ways.
Yeah, but that's in every facet. In your work, in any kind of, let's even take yoga as an example. Like, people get so serious about yoga, and it gets very aggressive and very competitive, and then suddenly yoga becomes about everything else that has nothing to do with yoga, and you're like, what is going on here, right? Because of these conversations that we are having with ourselves, which are so harsh and so, so aggressive and so goal specific and goal driven. And if I can't do a handstand, then my life is essentially over, and I'm not a good enough yogi, and I'm not this, and I'm not that. Like with me in my own yoga practice, there is so much stuff I cannot do, and right now I'm like, I'll never be able to do that. But that's not what I see it for. For me, it's an intuitive feeling process that is there to help me feel better about every other aspect of my life, and teach me and educate me and go, what's my mind doing? What's my body doing? And how does that relate? And what kind of mental state am I in? And how is that affecting my output? Because everyone around you can read it and see it and feel it. When you're in the workplace and you're coming to it from a place of, intense aggression, anger, dissatisfaction, fury, beration, it's not just something that you direct towards yourself. Everybody else feels it around you. When you're like that in sports, when you're like that, even on a playing level, as it were, everybody feels that around you and picks up that vibe off you. And likewise, when you are feeling kind and compassionate and considerate and thoughtful towards yourself, that naturally emanates towards other people, and they go, this person's in a different headspace. And I like being,
good, right?
Yeah, I like being around that. And that comes from the conversation that you're having with yourself. And that has nothing to do with being preachy, with being, really aloof and high and mighty and these sorts of things. It's just from like being present and nice with yourself.
Right.
Sends that out to other people. And that's what we need more of. Obviously we need seriousness, and we need positive stress, because that's what we need, the right amount of adrenaline, and discipline. And that's what I mean. Work ethic pays. And I believe so much in work ethic, and putting your head down and putting in the time and the effort, and that pays, and doing that with integrity and honesty, and that pays. But doing that all with a positive and encouraging, compassionate, softer mindset. Yeah, kindness. And you are such a wonderful example of that, because I know when I'm having those moments, and I know I've sent you messages and be like, I'm in this space and it's like negative, and you can just say something and it just transforms it back into that feeling of kindness, and going, yep, now I'm back to having that conversation with myself, the same conversation that I direct other people to have. And sometimes we all need someone above us, like outside us, to say, hey, I'm giving you a mental check. So in the way that, I help other people with their mental checks, I'm still a human being. I need other people to give me my mental checks. A lot of the time it's my husband, who's like, who's also, he is so non-stressed and very, very good at separating like any kind of emotional distress away from kind of more rational spaces, and going, like, what are you thinking, and what are you feeling, and how much of this is basically BS that's coming from outside, and also you need to take a break, and you need to stop working in the evenings, because this is your downtime, and you need to let loose, and you need to play. So it's really funny. But even saying that, I only feel like I attracted that kind of relationship when I was already doing that for myself. And that's a very interesting thing, I think, also as a whole. There's a whole separate conversation on the kinds of relationships that we can bring into our life when you change the mindset and the dialogue and the story that you have with yourself about who you are and what you are. So, but it comes back to that self-awareness and that conversation.
And I know that, so just to wrap it up, I know that you you've mentioned that you're going to be featured on Singapore's NBC on some wellness spots. So I wondered if you could either share some things that you might be sharing, or if there's, a piece of advice or recommendation that you find yourself often giving people.
I always come back to the concept, and this will be highlighted, I think, in the stuff that I'm doing, hopefully, that we are limitless. We are limitless. And, and we've talked about so many things like today, and I'm not sure it all kind of came through about this idea that, there are so many constructs and so many boundaries which are put in front of us, and so many times that you will be told that you are not this and you are not that and you can't do this, or if you're a woman, that you don't have place in science and you don't have place in the tech field and you don't have place in the construction industry, which is also something that I was in for 4 years, or that actually because you've been a science person, that means you can't be, a people person as well. There are so many labels that are put on us, and that you can only have, the things that you should be going for is like, if you want to do your job, then you need to focus on your job. And if you want to be a sports person, you can only focus on your sports person. Or if you love music, then that's the only thing that you can do. Or if you're in the, all these things, when actually you have all of these facets within you which are there for you to explore and play with and be curious. And even though other people will tell you that it's hard and that you don't have time for that and that there's no room for that, that you are completely entitled to take up that fascination and that interest and explore that, because you have the room for that. And you are the decider of what you get to put your time into, and not what everyone else, not what everyone else feels limited by. And I think so many times that people throw out these labels, it's because of people feeling that limitation within themselves, and that I don't want to say dissatisfaction, but almost like there is a creeping somewhere within them that is something that they want to explore somewhere, but they don't feel like they have room for. Whereas if you feel that inkling, go and explore it. It doesn't necessarily always lead to a life-changing this, that, or the other, but it will teach you something, and you will learn something about yourself and how you think and how you feel and how you want to continue engaging moving forward in this life. And that's where the interesting stuff happens. We are limitless. So if you want to be, a school-going, sports-doing, music-loving, art-creating, Instagram wizard, then go and do it and play with it and see what happens. And don't get so hung up on the failure and the fear. And the fear is usually a thing of, actually a positive indicator that it probably, it means something, it has value to you. And just go and do and be and explore, because there is so much to explore and so much to gain from being out in this world. And we've only just touched on it, but like just this world and the amount of traveling that I flew 42 times last year, which is insane, absolutely insane. Wow. And I only counted because I looked at the calendar and I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? But it is, moving yourself outside of your remit, outside of your box, even if it's like, get out of the city, just get out of the city and go for 2 hours in a direction that you have never been in before. Mm-hmm. You will learn something, you'll experience something. Or if you live in a part of the city, go to a different part of the city just to see like what is there, because there is going to be something that's, going to form an experience and a feeling in your body, in your mind. So yeah, we're limitless. We're limitless, and you have the right to explore that. You are entitled to explore that, and you can go and engage with anything that you feel passionate about, curious about, that you feel strongly about, and it will take you somewhere. And you can drive and move through all of these things without losing yourself in the process, without crashing, without burning, because your purpose and your goal is to do this for the long haul and to keep doing this continuously throughout your whole life. And if it feels terrible and if it feels awful, then, something's amiss. And then that means there's something else that you need to kind of, move into and explore as well. So yeah, I could go on about that forever.
Because life is short, right? Life is so short and precious.
It is short. And I'm 32 today, which is which I think is crazy because, naturally it's a very reflective time. I think being in your 30s as a woman is also a really, really intriguing and transformative and powerful time. And if I only had a fraction of, I think, some of the things that I know now that I did perhaps when I was in my 20s, maybe I'd be a different person. But no, I look back on all those experiences as being, so educational and so fundamental to where I am now and to where I'm continuing to go. There are the stupid things that, like young people will say to you and like young boys will say to you, and that they'll be like, your life is over past the age of 25. And it's all like a
No. I think,
oh my gosh.
I don't think life really starts until you're 40.
You are a glorious, glorious example of that. I kid you not. I had a guy that I dated, and he said his opinion was that, all women were over the hill after the age of 20.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. Anyway, here we are, 32. I feel like life is really starting to really come to the fore now. And it's, there are so many women, I think, around this age and around this time who do fight and struggle with that natural thing of like, I am older, and where is my relevance and where is my place, when actually there's so much accumulated wisdom and wonder and experience that can now really start like acting and coming to the fore.
Right. And as you get older, I think you care less about what other people think, and you settle more firmly into who you are as a person.
Yeah.
It's comforting. It's so comforting.
Yeah. And I think like this earlier part of my life was having a degree of self-ownership and self-awareness, but having to kind of like fight for that self-awareness and that ownership and that presence, in these difficult circumstances, and being like, this is me trying to prove that I am all these things, and, this is my right to be here. And you kind of get past this door just opens like when you turn 30. It's really weird, where a lot of people are like, oh, you can either panic about it and flip out, or for me it was very much, I am totally in woman's space now. I am in woman's space, and I'm in woman universe, and I love it. And it's wonderful because it's like, I've arrived, I am here, and this is all of me, unashamedly, and I don't apologize for myself, and none, we shouldn't be apologizing for ourselves, and this is what I have to give. And I believe everything that has come into my life is there for me to kind of give it back and give to, other young women, other men, that's what it's for. It's coming back to that, service space.
Well, and thank you for joining us on the podcast on your birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I could not imagine, honestly, a more lovely way to start my birthday conversation, reflecting on all of these big things. Actually, it's pretty big psych for me, actually. So thank you. Thank you for having me so much. And, I hope there's a semblance of something that resonates with all of the listeners out there.
I'm sure there is. The sun has gone down here. It's nighttime, but for you it's day. So have a fabulous day. And then for the listeners, if you are in the New York area in the last week of May, we are going to be having another flower flash mob. And we'll put the secret location on Instagram. And then if you're in the Chicago area around June 15th, we're having another Flower Lounge event. And then the following day, we'll be having a flower flash mob. So we'd love to get all of you in these big cities handing out flowers and doing meditation together and having a great time. We need to do one of these in Singapore, right?
You do. Because they have been so. I've cried watching some of the videos from these flower flash mobs. Like, I wish that I was just there to be part of that, because they're just so magical. And even at a distance across the internet and the oceans, how special that is. And yeah, I'm waiting. I wish I was in New York in May to come and do that, but.
We'll do it next time I'm in Singapore, or we can go to Bangkok together and get loads of orchids and hand out orchids in Bangkok.
Oh my goodness, that would be magic on another level.
My gosh. And then when we hand out all the flowers, we could just go have mangoes and sticky rice.
Mama Wang, it's my favorite.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, and thank you so much to the listeners for being with us again on the Flowerlounge Podcast. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.